I've been a royal guard for 11 years. 11 years of standing so still that pigeons use my boots as a perch. 11 years of watching a million faces pass by, each one blurring into the next. Tourists with selfie sticks, children waving little Union Jacks, old veterans who salute me, and I can't even nod back because that's the job. You become furniture. Important furniture, but furniture all the same. They don't tell you that part in the brochures. My name is Corporal James Whitaker, and until last Tuesday, I thought I had seen everything. A man once tried to propose to his girlfriend right in front of my post. Another time, a lost corgi wandered over and peed on my left boot. I didn't flinch. You learn to build a wall inside your head. You go somewhere else. A fishing lake in Norfolk. The memory of your mom's Sunday roast. Anything but the ache in your knees and the tickle in your nose. But this story isn't about me. Not really. It happened during the late afternoon shift, the one nobody wants. The golden hour, they call it in photography. For us, it's the hour when the crowd thins out. The families have gone back to their hotels, and the only people left are the stragglers and the lonely. The light turns soft and amber, the kind that makes London look like a painting. And that's when I noticed a car. Not an official car. Just a black SUV with tinted windows, the kind you see a dozen times a day around the palace. But this one pulled up to a side gate, the one we use for private family entrances. And out stepped a woman I recognized immediately. Not from tabloids or gossip shows. I recognized her because I had seen her cry once, 3 years ago, at the back of service. She had been holding her husband's hand, so tight her knuckles were white. Catherine, the Princess of Wales. She looked smaller than I expected. I know that sounds strange. You see these people on television, and they fill the screen. But standing there, adjusting the collar of a little boy's coat, she looked like any tired mom at the end of a long afternoon. The little boy was Prince Louis. 5 years old, though he looked smaller than his age. Messy hair, the kind that fights every brush. His shoes were already scuffed, and he had a smear of what looked like chocolate near his left ear. Behind them, a single protection officer. No fanfare, no cameras. Just a mum and her youngest son slipping through a side gate like they were trying not to be noticed. I didn't react. That's the rule. You see nothing. You hear nothing. Your eyes stay fixed on a point exactly 12 feet ahead, slightly to the left of the middle distance. But my ears were still working. And that's when I heard him. Louis was crying. Not a tantrum cry. Not the loud, attention-seeking wail you hear from kids in supermarkets. This was a quiet, choked kind of crying. The kind that says I've been holding this in for an hour and I can't hold it anymore. His shoulders were shaking inside his little navy coat. His mother had her hand on his back, guiding him gently toward the gate, but he kept stopping, dragging his feet, rubbing his eyes with the heel of his palm. "Come on, my love," Catherine said softly. Her voice was so low, I almost didn't catch it. We're nearly there. But Louis didn't move. He just stood there, staring at the ground. His breath came in little hitches. And then he looked up, right at me. I've had people stare at me before. Tourists do it all the time. They try to make you blink. They wave. They make faces. One bloke once did an entire mime routine in front of me, pretending to be trapped in a box. I didn't move a muscle. But Louis wasn't trying to make me laugh. He wasn't playing a game. He was looking at me like I was the only still thing in a world that had started spinning too fast. And that's when the first crack happened. Not in me. Not yet. In the air between us. Something shifted. A guard feels these things. You develop a sixth sense for when a situation is about to go sideways. But this wasn't a threat. It was something worse. It was a little boy who looked like he was carrying a weight no 5-year-old should have to carry. Catherine crouched down beside him. She whispered something in his ear. He shook his head. She tried to take his hand. He pulled away. Not rudely, just desperately. Like he didn't want to be touched, because touching might make the tears come faster. Then, she said something that made my chest tighten. "Do you want to talk to the guard?" I felt my pulse jump. That's not supposed to happen. Guards don't have pulses. Guards are carved from the same stone as the palace walls. But my heart definitely did something strange right then. A little skip, a flutter. Louis looked at me again. Really looked. His eyes were red-rimmed, his cheeks blotchy. He sniffled once, twice, and then he nodded. Catherine gave me a small, apologetic smile. The kind that says I'm sorry about this, but please just go along with it. She squeezed Lewis's shoulder and stepped back a few paces. Not far, just enough to give him space. The protection officer shifted his weight, keeping an eye on the crowd, but there was hardly anyone around. Just a few tourists taking photos of the palace gates, oblivious. Lewis walked toward me. His steps were slow, uncertain. He kept looking back at his mom, and she nodded each time, encouraging him. When he was about 3 feet away, he stopped. He stood there, tilting his head up to look at my face. I kept my eyes forward. I had to. The rules are the rules. But then he spoke, and his voice was so small, so impossibly small, like a bell wrapped in cotton. Are you real? I didn't answer. I couldn't. The rules say you don't speak unless spoken to by a superior officer or a member of the royal family in an official capacity. A 5-year-old boy asking if you're real doesn't technically count. But I wanted to answer. God help me, I wanted to kneel down and tell him, yes, I'm real, and so are you, and whatever is making you cry is going to be okay. But I just stood there. Lewis waited. He was used to adults not answering him, I realized. That thought broke something small inside me. He waited like a child who had learned that sometimes the people in uniforms don't talk back. Then he reached out. His little hand, still chubby with baby fat, hovered near my bearskin hat. He didn't touch it. He just let his fingers drift close, like he was testing whether I was made of the same stuff as the wax figures at Madame Tussauds. Mummy says you keep us safe, he whispered. I swallowed. The tiniest movement. But he saw it. His eyes widened. He saw my throat move. You are real, he said again, but this time it wasn't a question. And then he did something I will never forget for as long as I live. He sat down, right there on the wet gravel, cross-legged, like he was settling in for story time at school. His little trousers would be filthy. His mom would probably sigh, but he didn't care. He just sat down on my feet, hugged his knees to his chest, and started talking. I don't like the cameras, he said. They make that sound. The clicking. It's like insects. Do you hear it? Mummy says to smile, but my face gets tired. My heart was pounding now. I could feel it in my throat. Behind him, I saw Catherine take a half step forward, then stop. Her hand was over her mouth. Her eyes were wet. She knew. She knew this was one of those moments you can't interrupt. The kind that only comes once, if you're lucky. And people say my name wrong. Lewis continued, picking at a piece of gravel. They say it too loud, like they're angry. But I didn't do anything wrong. I just stood there. Like you. He looked up at me again. His lower lip trembled. Do you get tired of standing? I couldn't answer. But something in my face must have changed. A softening around the eyes. A slight parting of the lips. Because he saw it. This kid saw everything. You're not allowed to talk, he said. It wasn't a question. That's sad. He said it so matter-of-factly. That's sad. Like he was commenting on the weather. And maybe this one undid me. Not the crying. Not the questions. Just the simple, heartbreaking acceptance of it. A 5-year-old who already understood that some people aren't allowed to talk. And some people have to smile until their faces hurt. And the world is full of clicking insects that never shut up. I felt something hot behind my eyes. No, not here. Not now. I blink hard. Once. Twice. Lewis saw that too. You have wet eyes, he said softly. Like Mummy does. At night. When she thinks we're sleeping. Behind him, I heard Catherine make a small sound. A catch in her throat. The protection officer looked away, suddenly, very interested in a lamppost. Lewis stood up slowly, brushing the gravel off his trousers. He walked closer to me, so close I could smell the chocolate on his breath. And then he did something that no one will ever believe. He reached up and put his small hand on my arm, right on the sleeve of my scarlet tunic. His fingers were cold. He had been crying for a while, I realized, long before they got out of the car. It's okay to be tired, he said. I'm tired too. He looked back at his mom. She was crying openly now, silently, tears running down her face. She didn't wipe them away. She just let them fall. Lewis let go of my arm. He walked back to her, took her hand, and said something I couldn't hear. Then they turned and walked toward the side gate. And that was it. Or so I thought. Part two, what he said when he turned back. They were almost through the gate when Lewis stopped. He let go of his mother's hand and turned around. The golden light caught his hair, turned it into something soft and wild. He looked at me one more time. Not like a tourist. Not like a curious child. He looked at me like he was seeing someone for the first time. A real someone. And then he spoke again. His voice was clearer now. Stronger. Like he had made a decision about something. My great-grandpa was a guard too, he said. Before he was a king. People told him he couldn't cry either. But he did. Mummy told me. She said he cried when his mummy died. And he was allowed to. I felt the gravel shift under my boots. A tiny movement. An act of balance. But it felt like an earthquake. You're allowed to cry too, Lewis said. Even if no one says you can. The wind picked up. Just a little. It rustled the leaves on the trees near the palace wall. A single pigeon took off from a nearby railing. Somewhere in the distance, a bus groaned. Normal sounds. Everyday sounds. But everything felt different. The air had changed. Catherine knelt down beside Lewis and whispered something. He nodded, but he didn't move. He kept his eyes on me. My brother George says guards are robots, Lewis continued. But you're not a robot. Robots don't have wet eyes. He tilted his head, studying me like I was a puzzle he was trying to solve. Do you have a little boy? I couldn't answer. Of course I couldn't answer. But the question hit me like a punch to the chest. Because I did. I had a son. His name was Charlie. He was 4 years old. He had the same messy hair as Lewis, the same habit of rubbing his eyes when he was tired. I hadn't seen him in 4 days because of the shift pattern. His mom had sent me a video that morning. Charlie had built a tower out of blocks and then knocked it over and shouted, "Daddy, look," at the phone screen. I wasn't there. I was here, standing still, being furniture. Lewis must have seen something shift in my face because he nodded slowly, like he understood. He misses you, Lewis said. When my daddy goes away, I miss him, even when I don't say it. That was it. That was the moment. I felt my eyes burn. My throat closed up. 11 years of discipline, of training, of standing like a stone through rain and heat and pigeons and mimes and marriage proposals. 11 years of being a wall. And it all came down to a 5-year-old boy with chocolate behind his ear who had just told me it was okay to cry. I didn't cry. I didn't. But my eyes filled, and I couldn't blink it away this time. A single tear escaped. It rolled down my cheek, slow and warm, and disappeared into the collar of my tunic. Lewis saw it. He smiled. Not a big smile. Not a royal wave smile. A small, sad, knowing smile. The kind that belongs to someone much older. There, he said quietly. Now you're real too. Catherine stood up. She put her hand on Lewis's shoulder and gently turned him toward the gate. But before they disappeared inside, she looked back at me. Her eyes were still wet. She mouthed 2 words. Thank you. And then they were gone. The gate closed with a soft click. The protection officer followed them in. And I was alone again. Just me and the gravel and the golden light and the pigeon that had come back to sit on the railing. My face was wet. I didn't wipe it. I couldn't. My arms were locked at my sides. My eyes were supposed to be fixed on that point 12 feet ahead. But they weren't. They were fixed on the gate, on the space where a little boy had been standing. I heard footsteps behind me. One of the other guards coming to check on me. His name was Davies. Big bloke. 8 years on the job. Never cracked a smile in his life. You all right, Whitaker? He muttered, barely moving his lips. I didn't answer. He looked at my face. Saw the tear tracks. His eyes widened just a fraction. Then he looked away, quick, like he had seen something private. Right, he said quietly. Didn't see anything. He walked back to his post. The next hour passed in a blur. The crowd thickened again. A group of American tourists took photos. A teenager did a handstand in front of the gates. A woman asked me for directions to the nearest toilet. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I was a guard again. Furniture. But something was different. The wall inside my head had a crack in it now. A small one. And through that crack, I could hear a little boy's voice. You're allowed to cry. When my shift ended, I walked to the guard room. Took off my bearskin. Sat down on a wooden bench. My hands were shaking. I didn't know why. I hadn't done anything dangerous. I hadn't stopped a terrorist or saved a life. I just stood there while a child talked to me. And yet, I pulled out my phone. My fingers fumbled with the screen. I found a video Charlie had sent that morning. The tower blocks. The crash. The little voice shouting, "Daddy, look." I played it 3 times. Then I called my wife. "You're never going to believe what happened today," I said, and my voice cracked like a teenager's. "James!" She sounded scared. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," I said. And for the first time in a long time, I meant it. Nothing's wrong. Everything's just everything. I told her the story. All of it. The car. The crying. The small hand on my arm. The tear on my cheek. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. "Come home," she said finally. "Charlie's been asking for you. He built another tower. He wants to show you." I looked at the clock. 2 more hours until I could leave. "I'll be there," I said. And I was. Part 3, The Weight of Small Words. 3 days later, an envelope arrived at the guard barracks. Plain white. No return address. But the seal was familiar. Red wax. The royal cipher. My hands were steady when I opened it. Years of training. But inside, there was no official letter. No commendation. No orders. Just a piece of card. Heavy. Cream-colored. The kind you use for invitations to things ordinary people don't get invited to. On the front, a drawing. Crayon. A bit wobbly. 2 figures. One tall in a red uniform with a big black hat. One small with messy hair. Between them, a yellow sun with a smiley face. And at the bottom, in an adult's handwriting, a transcription of what the child had said. "You're allowed to cry even if no one says you can." Underneath, in different handwriting. Looser. More hurried. "Lewis hasn't stopped talking about you. He wants to know your name. He says you're his favorite guard. I told him you probably have rules about that sort of thing. He said rules are silly sometimes." I couldn't argue. "Catherine," I read it 7 times. Then I folded it carefully and put it in the pocket over my heart. The same pocket where I keep a photo of Charlie. The next day, I was back on post. Same spot. Same uniform. Same pigeons. But something had shifted. The other guards noticed. Davies kept glancing at me, like he was waiting for me to fall apart. I didn't. I stood straighter than I had in years. Because here's the thing I realized. For 11 years, I thought the job was about being invisible. About not reacting. About building that wall so high and so thick that nothing could get through. But that little boy taught me something. The wall wasn't protecting me. It was keeping me from the best part of the job. The part where you're not furniture. You're not a statue. You're not a tourist attraction. You're a person, standing in the cold, keeping people safe. And sometimes, just sometimes, a 5-year-old with chocolate behind his ear reminds you that being human isn't a weakness. It's the whole point. I still don't move when tourists wave. I still don't flinch when the pigeons land too close. But now, when I see a child crying, I let myself feel it. Just a little. Just enough to remember. And at night, when I get home, I pick up Charlie. I hold him until he squirms. I tell him I love him. I don't wait for the right moment. I don't save it for birthdays or holidays. I say it right then, in the messy kitchen with spaghetti on the floor and the dog barking at nothing. Because you never know who needs to hear it. A few weeks later, I was on post again. Late afternoon. Golden light. The crowd was thin. And then I saw them. A black SUV. The side gate. A woman with dark hair and a tired smile. And a little boy who ran ahead of her, his shoes scuffing the gravel. He stopped in front of me, looked up, grinned. "You're still here?" he said. I didn't move. I didn't speak. But I smiled. Just a little. Just with my eyes. And Lewis nodded, like that was exactly what he had been waiting for. He ran back to his mother, grabbed her hand, and disappeared through the gate. But right before he went in, he turned around one more time. By guard, he called out, "See you tomorrow." And the funny thing is he did. Not every day, but often enough. He would wave from the car window, or shout hello from the gate. And each time, I would give him that small smile. The one only he could see. Because some rules are silly, and some moments are worth breaking them for. The end.